All right, and so yeah, I'll give you a book plug. SketchUp Workflow for Architecture, part 3, I think it is all about layout. So I've taken every single layout tool and broken it down and shown you exactly how to use it. And all of these, like double click, hold alt, click and drag, all of these tricks or these buried features are completely covered in my book. So if you're looking to learn layout, the book is a great desktop resource to kind of have on hand while you're working in here. And you can flip to the page and there's diagrams that show step 1, 2, 3, 4 on how to use the tools. All right, let's move on. So myth number 3. Now, this is the big one, all right? Layout is slow. I can't tell you how many times I hear that layout is slow, and it is just not the truth. So layout is slow for 2 reasons, user error and user error, all right? So user error number 1 is that oftentimes people don't know the settings, how to turn the settings off and dial it down so that it's not rendering everything at super high quality, or they don't understand the render settings of vector, raster, and hybrid, or auto render and how to render just one image or just one page. And if you understand those settings, first, even if you do have a heavy model, you're not going to render the whole set at any given time. You're just going to render one page. And that is easy to wait for. Maybe that takes 10 seconds. All right. Now the other side of this, the other user error is to tell layout to do something that is absolutely ridiculous. So SketchUp and LayOut, they really are these like simple, dumb programs. If you tell layout to flatten 10 billion faces, it'll do that. And it'll take forever and you'll end up clicking on it. It'll say, do you want to force close this thing? And you'll crash. But the point is that you should never ask layout to do these ridiculous tasks. So you need to be aware of like how much geometry is in your 3D model, first off, and then how much geometry you're asking layout to flatten. So, and then if you're asking it to flatten it over and over and over, every time that you save your model and reload it, and then you're rendering the entire set, this is no good. So in this, in busting this 2-part myth, I'm going to show you everything you need to know about controlling the layout settings, and then also I'm going to show you some tricks about how we can like scale back the tasks that we're asking layout to do. And I promise that when I use layout, it's always fast, it's always snappy. All right, so let's hop in there, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So for this one, let's see, we're going to open up. I'm going to open up the master suite in SketchUp, and we're going to go through some condoc tools functions here. So I'll go to my desktop, and I've got my layout myths, and I've got my master suite. Okay. Now, I can tell you that the master suite, this model that I'm using, this is on the 3D warehouse. So if you type in condoc into the 3D warehouse, you'll find our master suite model. This is a great one to get your hands on. Now, notice that it's a pretty nice model. Like, it's got a lot of organic modeling going on. If I turn on my hidden geometry, we do have like the appropriate amount of surfaces. We've got rolled edges. This model renders beautifully in Lumion, and that's why I built it this way. And that's okay. That's, we needed this level of detail. That's what we're going for. But I'm going to show you some tricks on how to manage this when it gets into layout. All right. So let's see. The first thing that we're going to do is kind of off script here. I want to see if, let me think for just a moment. Okay, so we're going to create a plan, and so I'm just going to run the condoc tools. So I'll click first, I'm going to open a drawing set. All right, so when I click open a drawing set, these are the standard issue condoc tools drawing sets. So we're going to use Condoc Interiors 2019. So that's the drawing set that's perfectly suited for this master suite model. All right. And then I'm going to run the plan generator. So whenever I load a drawing set, that reprograms Condoc. So now I can automate all of these different drawings that are really perfect for an interior designer. All right. So I'm going to run this to create a construction plan and a furniture and presentation and reflected ceiling plan. That's fine. We'll just run those. And when I click Setup Project, you can see that it just spit out all these different scenes. All right. So now I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to kick this set out to layout. So using the condoc export, I can kick all of these drawings out at 1/4 inch. So I'm going to hit send to layout. All right. And then we'll say, okay, got it. Now what this does, it takes all these scenes that we created, and then it's going to kick them all out, stack all the viewports, assign the line weights, and this way we have something to work with when we get into layout. So we'll let that kind of crank for just a moment. Shouldn't take too long, and then we'll get set up over in layout. All right, good to go. So now I'm going to hop over into layout, and I'm going to let's just delete this geometry out of here, and we can stick with this title block. And I'm going to go down here to my condoc drawings, and here we have a construction plan. Now the construction plan is not exactly what I'm real concerned about. Okay, so let's just drop it in there though, so you can see there's our construction plan at 1/4 inch, and then let's go to the next page. And then here's like a furniture plan at 1/4 inch, and you can see I'm missing that bed, and we're going to get to that. And we'll go to our presentation plan, and that one is going to be at 1/4 inch as well. All right, so I just want to drop these plans in here, and you can see how easy it is to kind of generate all this stuff. So now, when I'm in layout, and let's just kind of scoot these around and get them shaped up on our page like that. And let's pick one to work with. All right. So now whenever I am working in layout, there's a couple of real critical settings. All right. So first I'm going to go to File, Document Setup, and let's go to Paper. All right. So the paper settings, if you're using our rendering resolution, the display resolution should always be set to low. The output resolution should always be set to high. All right. Now the output resolution, that doesn't actually come into play until you hit like File, Export, 2D Graphic. And the truth is, this is a default. It's going to ask you again if you want to render high or low when you actually export. But I think it's good just to set it to high. I always export at high resolution. All right. Now, display resolution is more important, because if I change my display resolution, watch what happens. All right. So I'll zoom in. You can see this is kind of pixelated. Now I'm going to flip this over to high like that. And when I do that, I'm going to get that. Let's make sure. This is very likely that you have your auto render turned on. So that's where when I flip over to high, it's now spinning the wheel because it's rendering everything in the set. And you can see that that took, I don't know, maybe 10 seconds, let's call it. All right. So this is the other setting that I want to talk about, is auto render. All right. Let me set this back to low. And you can see that, you know, when I rendered it high, it took 10 seconds. Low, that should happen rather quickly. So auto render means that it's going to render everything all at once. And so that happened a little quicker. Now, I can tell you what happens here is that this is a good example of like a raster graphic, right? And if this drawing on the page is roughly 6 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall, all right? So if you stretch this drawing out and make it like 24 by 36, and it's like a raster graphic, and you're rendering it at high resolution, like how many pixels does it take to get a 24 by 36 image to render at 300 DPI? Because that's what high resolution is. So that's going to take like thousands, you know, like if it's 36 wide times 300, it's like 10,000 pixels. That's huge. And then if you're asking it to render every single page every single time, that is a massive task. If you have like a 20-page set and you have your auto render and you've got your display resolution turned to high. So we're going to turn our display resolution is on low. And then the other thing is this auto render. All right. So check this out. If I'm going to take these drawings and I'm going to cut them, and then I'm going to add a page and I'm going to paste them over here. All right. So now we've got like two separate pages in layout. And so one page is going to be, two of these drawings. So that's our first page over here. And then the second page is these other two drawings. All right. So what I want to show you now is if I turn auto render off like that. All right. And then I'm going to go back into layout and I'm going to set up this bed to not be on the 3D object layer. So we're going to double click into this bed and I'm going to turn off, let me see, this should have a 3D object to it. Yeah, so let's just set that back to 0 and we'll fix that again later. So what this means is that when this is not on a 3D object layer, that means that this bed is going to be flattened and rendered in layout. All right, so I'm going to save this. All right, so I Control S and I save my SketchUp model. I go back into layout and check this out. Auto render is turned off. So when I go to document setup, references, and I'm going to update this model. So I'll click update. All right, well, how fast did that happen? It took 2 seconds. The model is updated, but you can see now we have all of these exclamation points. Now what that means is that the viewports need to be rendered. Now that's okay. Like, I think a lot of people see this exclamation point and they think it's an error. It's not an error, it's just a warning just telling you that like what you're seeing in the viewport hasn't been rendered yet. So when auto render is turned off, you're going to see these warnings. And that's okay, that's a good thing because we don't want to render the entire set every time we update our model. So let me show you how to render just specific pieces. All right, so like one way I can work is I could like double click into this and select only these viewports and right click on it and choose render model. So I'm literally only rendering this one drawing and that took like no time at all. All right, so no big deal. Another way that you can render your pages is just right click in the background and choose render models on page. So when I do that, it's going to render every single model on the page. All right, so I'll go back to this other side and then I'll right click and choose render models on page like that. And so then that one's going to take just a moment and watch for that bed. That should pop in here on both of them. Perfect. So, this is a lightweight model in general. It's not like a huge model, but it does have some pretty heavy pieces to it, like the bed and the chair. What else? Like, when I look at this, I can see that like these, all this furniture, it looks great in Lumion, but in layout, it gets pretty heavy and I don't want to tell layout to render that over and over. All right. So keep in mind the settings we just talked about, just to give a quick recap. Document setup, paper. Display resolution is always set to low because I don't need to see everything rendered at high resolution while I'm working on it. If you do want it to be at high resolution, that's okay. You can just turn it on to high and then you can say like, well, I only want to render this one piece of my set. I'm just going to render this one drawing. That's going to get updated and my exclamation point goes away. All right. I'm going to set this one back to low though, because the display resolution should always be set to low. Keep in mind that if you have auto render turned on, watch what happens when I turn on auto render. All right, so everything has an exclamation point. When I click auto render on, this is going to crank through and render the entire set. If this were 15 pages long, it would render all 15 pages, and if it were set to high quality, it would render them all at high quality. It would take forever. All right, so now you can see that it did render out the whole set. So my advice to you is usually the way that I work is I leave auto render turned on at the beginning. And as soon as I find that I'm slowing down, I turn it off. And if auto render is not slowing you down, if it's a real lightweight model, real quick, snappy presentation, no problem. We'll leave it on. But if you're bogging down and the computer's choking, turn that auto render off and render just the pieces that you need when you need them. Cool. All right, so that's the settings that we're talking about. But the next part of busting this myth is to not tell layout to do ridiculous tasks. So if you're gonna use a bed that has all the pillows and teddy bears and all this stuff on it, and you're gonna tell layout to flatten it, well, that's a pretty big task. That bed is pretty high poly. I mean, it's well modeled, but it's like, you know, you have a couple bedrooms and a couple beds, and all of a sudden you're waiting 5 minutes to render this drawing. So let's flatten it for layout. Let's make a 2D graphic. Now, this is perfectly explained in my book, SketchUp Workflow for Architecture. We explain the idea of having a 3D object and then a 2D graphic. And the way that that works is a 3D object, it's on a layer. The 3D object is the 3D representation of the object. So, for instance, a door. You know, the 3D object for the door is the actual door, and it might have like some detail, you know, some different panels. It might have a latch to it. You can add as much detail to that 3D object as you want, because the 3D object layer is always turned on in perspective, section, and elevation. Now, if you're going to have a 3D object, you need to have a 2D graphic that complements it. Again, with our door example, the swing of the door is the 2D graphic. So no matter how heavy your 3D object of the door is, you're only going to see the 2D graphic, the door swing, which is like maybe 25 lines. It's super lightweight. So we can use this exact same strategy for anything. Anything that does not render properly in plan, we can switch it to be a 3D object and then draft the 2D graphic. Now, that's what I'm going to do with our bed, our nightstand, our chairs, and I think that we're going to get our render time just really cut down, I'm guessing at least in half. I mean, it's already pretty snappy, but we're going to pare it down, and I'm going to show you some tricks on how to like save components out, create your 2D graphic, and then reload them back in super quick. All right, so let's get to that. Let's hop over here to our SketchUp model, and you can see that we have our bed. I'll double click in. This is all of our furniture, okay? So you can see that, you know, if I go to view and turn on my hidden geometry, you can definitely see that like that bed, you know, it's well modeled, but it does have a lot of polygons and a lot of faces and edges and all that. And if I have to flatten that bed in layout, it's going to take a moment. And if I have to flatten the nightstands and the dresser and the chair and the lamp, it's going to take some time. Now, no problem. If it renders fast, it's all good. But, you know, I might get to the point here where I want to start swapping these out to have 2D graphics, because the other point of this is I don't really love the way that this is rendering in plan. You know, we're getting kind of some heavy line weights here, some doubled up lines. I want to like thin this thing out and make it look like a perfect 2D graphic of a bed. So to do that, you can just draw some simple shapes. I'm going to do the nightstand first. All right. So I'm just going to double click in, and here's my nightstand. I'm going to select all and then make this into a group. All right. Then I'm going to click on this drop down and go to my 3D object. So now the 3D representation of my nightstand is controlled by the 3D object layer. If I'm going to have a 3D object, I do need to have a 2D graphic. So I'm going to make this into a group and stretch this to the ends here, and I'll just kind of go to the extents like this, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not being like super precise, something like that, and you know, that looks pretty good right there. So we just need a 3D representation, a 2D representation of this nightstand. Now, this square that I just drew, I'm going to put this onto a 2D graphic layer. So now the 2D representation of this nightstand is controlled by my 2D graphic layer. Now remember, the 3D object layer is automatically turned off in all of your plans. So you're never going to have, at this point, this 3D representation, this super heavy dresser. You know, if I double click in here and just take a look at like some of these pieces, I mean, that's 51, you know, that's 2,500 entities. Do you want to flatten 2,500 entities plus who knows how many more for all this other stuff? Or do you want to flatten 5? I mean, it's astronomical how much of the workload you can take off of layout by simply creating 2D graphics and 3D objects. And also you're going to get a much cleaner result. Your plans are going to look better. All right. So what I'm going to do here is we've now set up our 2D graphic and our 3D object for the nightstands. So I'm going to save this, and I'm going to hop over into layout, and I'll go to my file document setup and look at my references. All right, and I'm going to zoom in on this nightstand. All right, so you can see that this is out of date. I do have my auto render turned on, and I'm okay with that right now. So we'll just click update, and then so that's going to go through and render all of my scenes, and then you're going to see that turns to a nice clean square. Perfect. All right, so that is the general idea of a 2D graphic and a 3D object. It's drastically reducing the workload, and it's making my drawings look cleaner. All right, so now let me show you another technique. All right, so I think this one is super cool. I'm going to double click into the bed here, and let's see. All right, so this is my bed. This is a group. I'm going to make this into a component, and I'm just going to call it bed like that. And then I'm going to right click on the bed and choose Save As, and I'm going to save it to my desktop temp. All right, so I always have this temp folder on my desktop, and I'm going to save that out. And then whenever I save something out like this, I can right click on my SketchUp icon down low and really quickly open up the bed in a separate SketchUp model. And I just kind of leave the other model alone. Let's just like let it sit there for a moment. And here's the bed component model. All right, now in here I don't need my model info, and let's kind of reorganize our screen a bit. And all right, so here's the bed. So this is like the whole thing is contained, you know, in one group, and I don't want to shift it around in here because I am going to reload this component. But what I need to do is I need to set up our 3D object and our 2D graphic. So for the bed, I'm going to just draw a square, or a rectangle more so, from point to point like that. And then I'm going to double click, make this a group. All right, so here is my 2D graphic. It doesn't matter really where that 2D graphic sits. You know, I often just kind of, I don't put them like right on the ground. I usually kind of let them like float right in the middle, but I'll put it right here so it's clear what's going on. All right, so we have a 2D graphic and we have a 3D object. But SketchUp doesn't know that these are our 2D graphics and our 3D objects. What we need to do is get those layers in here. Now this is also where Condoc comes in. So I'm going to bring up my Condoc system, and that's under extensions Condoc system like that, and that opens up this Condoc system heads up display. Now I do have our Condoc interiors loaded. Watch what happens when I click design. It drops all the layers that I need into this model. So now it makes it really easy for me to select my 2D graphic and make a 2D graphic, and my 3D object is now a 3D object. So now these two layers are controlled like that. All right, but the 2D graphic is lacking a bit. So we're gonna double click in there, and I'm just gonna kind of draft up you know, something like this, and then maybe like 12 inches, and you know, and you can have these 2D graphics like already set up. Maybe I'll make like the pillows kind of like that, and then set this up in the middle and make a copy, oh, say 3 inches, and then another copy at 6 inches, and clean this up. All right. So I think that's pretty close to like how we're drafting a bed. Maybe it was like that. I forget. That's okay. Point is, this is going to be a really clean 2D graphic, and then I'm going to go one step further, and I'm going to use some of these materials. All right, so I'm going to sample like that blue material, the yellow material, and then the sheets, and we're going to make, yeah, that's cool like that. And oh, I don't know, maybe we'll do that there or that. No, I like it like that. That's fine. Doesn't matter. But you can make that 2D graphic into anything you want. And the reason I'm putting those materials on it is because they're going to show up in my presentation plan. All right. So to recap, we have our 3D object. You can see that 3D representation of the bed is on a layer called 3D object. The 2D representation of the bed is on a layer called 2D graphic. And now I can save this and I can close it. And look, I'm right back into my master suite model. All I have to do is right click and choose reload. I don't even have to mess with the name. It already knows the path. I just say open. And now that's going to drop in our SketchUp model. Our bed now has the 2D graphic and the 3D object. All right. So let me give a quick recap on why I did that. Sometimes it's your model can be heavy, and that's okay. It really is okay to use heavy components, because sometimes the heavier components look better. And that's how you want to see it when you render it in Lumion. That's how you want to see it when you present. Maybe it's like the actual Kohler toilet that you are going to put in there. You want the actual representation. That's okay. You can have the heavy model. Just don't send that heavy model to layout, because it's going to take a lot of effort for layout to flatten that thing out. So it's easy to just make a 2D graphic. So the reason I saved it out is because your model, if you have a lot of stuff going on, sometimes it's nice just to kick that one component out and then create this 3D object 2D graphic, and then reload it and then close that other window. So I'm constantly doing that, kind of pulling models out, working on it, and then reloading it. I got to tell you, this is another way to distribute work. One thing I could do here is right click and choose Save As and kick all these components out, and then ask someone else, hey, can you fix all my 3D objects 2D graphics? And then when I get the word that they're all done, I just go back here and reload everything, and then they're all set. So this is also an opportunity to distribute work amongst a team. So that's another reason. So let's keep going with this example though. I'm gonna save this model, and then I'm gonna hop back over here into Layout. Now check this out. I'm going to zoom out a bit because I want to see both of these guys kind of update here. All right. So you can see we have both the beds going on, and they're both like, they have all the pillows and everything going on. So I'm going to click here, and I'm just going to click update. And again, we have our auto render turned on. So it's just going to automatically render both of these pages. And what's going to happen is you're going to see all that stuff go away, and we get that nice, clean 2D graphic. That is, and I don't know, I could feel it, how fast that rendered. That was much different than the last time, because that bed did not get rendered on both of these pages. So it went really quick. All right. Now, let me show you another trick. This one, this is in the same style of what I'm up to here of saving a model out. But what if you don't want to draft a 2D graphic? If you, well, first off, it's easy to find 2D graphics. I mean, you probably already have a huge CAD library. You can import those CAD symbols and put those as your 2D graphic. That's a really good idea, because you've already got all that work done. You can just use those libraries as your 2D graphics. But if you don't have the perfect representation, you can make it. I can kick that chair out, right? So check this out. I'm going to take this chair, I'm going to save it out, and I'm going to export a 2D graphic as a DWG of the chair, and then I'm going to pull it back in and make that my 2D graphic. So it's like I'm pre-flattening it so that Layout doesn't have to flatten it over and over and over again. All right, so let me show you what I mean. I'm going to hop back here into SketchUp, and we've got the last piece of this is going to be our chair. All right, so I'm going to go to this chair. You can see this is a Form Fonts model, and I'll take a moment to plug Form Fonts. I mean, these guys are absolutely exceptional. Formfonts.com. They have the best SketchUp models. They're all perfectly textured, well modeled. They're lightweight enough that they don't bog down your model, but they look good. That's where I get all of my objects from. Now, this one, I'm going to right click on it and choose Save As. Now this one is called, Form Fonts Model ID, whatever. I'm just going to hit Save. I don't care about the name. I'm going to right click on my SketchUp icon and open up that model. So it's going to open the chair in a separate SketchUp instance. And now what I can do is go to Camera, Standard Views, Top, Camera, Parallel Projection. Then I'm going to go to File, Export, 2D Graphic. So I'm going to export a snapshot of this chair in plan, and we're going to export this out as a DWG, and I'm going to save it to my desktop temp. All right, so this is going to be an AutoCAD file, a DWG. It's a 2D graphic, not a 3D model. We're exporting a 2D graphic. I'll look at my options. I got to tell you, AutoCAD 2000, I always go with that. We're definitely doing full scale. And then everything looks good here. You really don't need to mess with this. We don't have extensions, but I'll turn those off either way. I'll say okay, and then export to my desktop temp folder. So that happened extremely fast. I'm gonna go to File, Import, and then I'm gonna go Desktop Temp, and I'm gonna import an AutoCAD file. You can see here is the AutoCAD file that I just created. I'll click Import, and there we are. So now you can see I have a 2D graphic of that chair. And what I really can do now is I can go in here and I can clean this thing up. So when I find these little like heavy lines, you know, where it's like line work is doubled up, you can go in here and you can fix it. And I can tell you that, like, you know, doing this is not hard. It doesn't take too long, but like if I were to work on this chair, let's just do it once, you know, like let's not like, you know, do this once and then save it to your library so that every time you drop this chair into a model, you've got it all set up with your 2D graphic and your 3D object. So I'm just going to do a little bit of cleanup on this, and let's see, I've got a connection over here, so we'll get rid of that, and I'm going to get rid of this line like that, delete. I'm okay with, you know, the way that looks. I probably don't want these guys on there. That's line work I don't need. I think those look nice. Let's clean up this side as well, like that, and like that, and like that. Okay, and you know, so any of these little lines are gonna like, they just kind of thicken things up, and they don't look that great. So less line work is better, and of course I would definitely go in here and, you know, clean up all of this stuff too. But you know, for purposes of demonstration, I think you get the point that it doesn't take long to create these 2D graphics and 3D objects, and if you do it once, you can save it to your library and you are good to go. All right, so there's my 2D graphic, there's my 3D object, and you can see that I didn't quite get all the pieces in there. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go back and look at my layers. I don't wanna hit the plus sign and have to type in condoc underscore 2D graphic, hit the plus sign, condoc underscore 3D object. I'm simply going to open up my condoc system and click design. It drops all the layers that I need in there, and now I can select my 2D graphic and assign that to my 2D graphic layer. I'm gonna hold shift and invert my selection, and then I'm gonna turn this chair into a group. This is going to be my 3D object. All right, so now I have my 3D object, my 2D graphic. We are in good shape. You know, if you really wanna, you could always purge this model, but these layers are gonna come in anyway. They already exist. I'm good with it. We'll just purge our model in the end. I save this one, I close it, right click, reload. I don't have to touch anything. I can just hit enter. Check it out. I've got my 2D graphic now floating underneath my chair. All right, so we're in good shape. You know, another quick one. Let's just take all this stuff. That's one group for a 3D object, and then maybe I'll use my circle tool and I'll just go about the middle and say like a circle like that, make this into a group and call that one my 2D graphic. That's going to drastically clean up the look of the way this lamp renders in plan. I'm going to back out of here and I'm going to save this model. All right, so I'll just unhide everything, save it, and then hop back into layout. And let's turn off auto render. All right, so I'm going to turn that off because I don't want to render the other page that I'm not working on right now. I'll just update this. All right, and now I just want to render this page that I'm on. Now watch what happens when I right click and render models on page. I'm watching for this chair to clean up, and I'm looking for the lamp to get really simplified, and I'll render the models on the page, and that's going to happen very quickly. So you can see that now I have that clean 2D graphic, and this, the difference between rendering all of those surfaces versus rendering just my line work is drastic. Let's actually count that. You know, let me go into this chair, and you know, I'm going to open that chair again. I'm just going to open it in its own window, and I'm going to explode the chair down because I want to know exactly how many surfaces actually makes up this chair. All right, so I'm just going to explode everything down and give it a good solid triple click. And you know, this chair is like 1,000 entities. That's not too bad, honestly. It's a pretty lightweight chair. But then if I go into my 2D graphic, we only have 153 edges, and I could further simplify that. So if you think about this, you could either render your 1,000 entities or you could render 150, and then apply that logic to every single piece of your model. You can really shave a lot of effort out. Now, I can tell you that some pieces of the model really, it doesn't matter. It's like, I'll close out of this and I don't need to save that. I would definitely throw a 2D graphic for the dresser, and you can see I did a 2D graphic for my lights because I want a specific look. But a lot of stuff, it doesn't really need it. You can leave your vanities alone, but if they're not rendering properly in plan, just make a 2D graphic. It does not take long at all, and a lot of my library components already have a 2D graphic associated with them. So you can think of this as another just quick story. Somebody we've worked with for a long time came to me and said, this layout plan will not render. It is just crashing every single time. So I took a look at the model. The model was not excessive. It was like, it was under 100 megabytes, no big deal. And the problem was that in the parking lot, they put several trucks, like 100 trucks, 50 trucks. It was like a warehouse with a shipping and loading area. And so all these trucks, they looked great in perspective, but they were rather heavy models. And when you take 50 or 100 of them and render them in plan, it just completely locked up layout. Layout would not get through it, and it was taking forever, even like letting it render over lunch break. Now, what I suggested and fixed it immediately was I just kicked the truck out. I exported a 2D graphic. I refined the look of it, made it look the way I wanted it to, and reloaded it. And now when layout is flattening that drawing, it's not flattening that whole 3D truck. It's just using the 2D graphic. So this technique, it is extremely powerful. You should fully understand it. It's definitely outlined in my book, SketchUp Workflow for Architecture. We have all the diagrams, and take a look at if you need to understand how this works, just type into the 3D warehouse, go to Condoc, and take a look at our Condoc 4 collection has the Condoc toilet. When I've dropped that in there, you can see that our Condoc toilet, it has a perfect 3D object right here, and it has a 2D graphic that is super lightweight. So you can really shave a lot of work off of what you're asking layout to do. So again, in Synopsis here, layout is not slow. That is a myth. Layout is extremely snappy. It's one of the fastest drafting programs, fastest, simplest, easy to use drafting programs I've ever been in. And when you're using it with SketchUp, you definitely want to be aware. So you need to be aware of the settings of auto render, paper quality, edit quality, and then you also need to be aware of what you're asking layout to do. Don't ask layout to flatten 10 million surfaces. It will choke. But you can get around that with your 2D graphics and also shopping like on Form Fonts and get those clean, lightweight models.